Racist woman refuses to sit beside black man shocked when arrested. The cabin of the airplane hummed with the quiet murmur of passengers settling into their seats. Marcus adjusted the strap of his laptop bag, tucking it neatly beneath the seat in front of him. With a deep breath, he cracked open his book, eager to dive into a chapter on business growth before takeoff. This was supposed to be a routine flight, productive, uneventful. But then, she arrived. Karen stormed down the aisle, dragging her carry-on suitcase with a tense grip. Her sharp eyes scanned the row numbers with irritation, as if the seating arrangement itself was a personal offense. She carried herself with an air of entitlement, the kind of woman used to getting her way in every little detail. When she stopped at Marcus's row, she hesitated, her face twisting with visible disdain. "Excuse me." Karen's voice was sharp and cold. "I think there's been a mistake." A passing flight attendant turned to her with a polite smile. "Can I help you?" "I need to change seats," Karen declared, gesturing at Marcus without even looking directly at him. "I shouldn't be sitting here." The attendant checked her chart. "This is the correct seat. Is there a specific issue?" Karen hesitated, her lips pressed into a thin line before she spoke again, her words laced with an unspoken implication. "I just think this isn't going to work for me." Marcus exhaled slowly, sensing the weight behind her words. He didn't need her to say it outright. He had encountered this before. But he kept his focus on his book, pretending not to hear. "I'm afraid we're fully booked," the attendant said firmly. "Please take your seat so we can prepare for takeoff." Karen let out a frustrated sigh, wedging herself into the middle seat with exaggerated movements, making sure to jostle Marcus in the process. As the plane's doors closed with a final hiss, the tension between them solidified like a wall of ice. Once the flight was in the air, Karen's agitation only grew. She shifted in her seat, bumping Marcus's arm repeatedly, adjusting her tray table up and down with deliberate force. Finally, she let out a dramatic sigh, ensuring her voice carried. "You'd think people would have the decency to offer up a seat when they know someone else isn't comfortable," she muttered, her tone dripping with self-righteousness. Marcus closed his book, turning to her with a calm but firm gaze. "Is there something you'd like to say to me?" Karen blinked, momentarily caught off guard. Then she straightened, lifting her chin. "I'm just saying, some people don't think about how their presence might make others uneasy." A man across the aisle raised an eyebrow, clearly catching her words. A murmur spread through the nearby passengers. Marcus held her gaze, his voice unwavering. "If you're uncomfortable, that's your issue, not mine." Karen scoffed, turning sharply toward the aisle and flagging down a flight attendant. "I need to change seats," she demanded. The same attendant from earlier approached, her patience wearing thin. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but as I mentioned before, we're fully booked." Karen's tone sharpened. "I don't think it's safe for me to sit here. I don't know this man, and he's making me feel threatened." The cabin fell silent. The accusation hung heavy in the air, a familiar but insidious tactic. Marcus stiffened, keeping his hands in his lap as he processed the weight of her words. Nearby passengers exchanged glances, their murmurs growing louder. The flight attendant's professional demeanor didn't waver. "Ma'am, this gentleman hasn't done anything wrong. Please remain seated and refrain from making further remarks." Karen's face burned red with frustration. "So I just have to sit here and feel unsafe?" Marcus finally spoke, his voice even but powerful. "Exactly what is unsafe about me sitting here? Reading my book?" Karen turned on him, her indignation spilling over. "You're invading my personal space. And frankly, I don't feel comfortable being this close to someone I don't trust." A passenger 2 rows back called out, "Lady, he's just sitting there. You're the one making a scene." Karen's eyes darted around, realizing the tide was turning against her. "You have no idea what it's like to feel unsafe," she snapped. Marcus let out a quiet, humorless chuckle. "You're right. I don't know what it's like to feel unsafe sitting next to someone minding their own business." A ripple of laughter and murmured agreement swept through the cabin. Karen's mouth opened and closed as her rage swelled. But before she could lash out again, the flight attendant leaned in, her tone firm. "Ma'am, If you continue to disrupt the flight, I will be forced to report this. Karen whipped around, her fury boiling over. Report me? For standing up for myself? This is harassment. The murmurs grew louder. A young man too rose ahead, who had been quietly recording the ordeal on his phone, finally spoke up. No, lady. This is you embarrassing yourself. Karen's face twisted in fury. You can't record me. That's illegal. The man leaned back in his seat, unfazed. Not illegal on a public flight. And honestly, keep going. You're making my day. Karen shot up from her seat, her movements erratic. This is unacceptable, she shrieked. I will not be silenced by you people. Passengers gasped as her rage filled the small cabin. A flight attendant rushed forward. Ma'am, sit down immediately. But Karen didn't sit. Instead, she squared her shoulders, jabbing a trembling finger at Marcus. He's the one causing all this. He's intimidating me. That was the breaking point. The flight attendant gave a sharp nod to a nearby crew member. Call security. By the time the plane landed, uniformed officers were waiting at the gate. Karen's protests turned frantic as she was escorted off the flight, her voice growing shriller by the second. You're all going to regret this. You can't treat me like this. I was the victim. The moment she disappeared down the jet bridge, the cabin burst into scattered applause. Marcus exhaled deeply, his hands gripping the armrests tightly. A woman seated nearby leaned over and whispered, You handled that way better than I would have. Marcus offered a small nod, but inside, he was exhausted. This wasn't the first time he had faced prejudice, but for once, someone had been held accountable. And that was something.